Previously on First Impressions.
Trust me, I'll definitely get around to talking about that movie. Hi, I'm Danny Quinn, and welcome to the newest episode of First Impressions. On tonight's episode, Tom Cruise battles the undead in this latest update of the Universal Monsters classic, The Mummy. This movie is about a soldier in the Middle East, played by Tom Cruise, who comes across the tomb of the ancient princess Amunet, played by Sofia Boutella, who was mummified alive and entombed for 1,000 years after murdering her family and attempting a ritual to give the Egyptian god Set a physical form. Once she is unleashed, she begins feeding to regenerate her decomposed body and seeks to succeed in bringing the god Set into the world, and she has already chosen her sacrifice. It seems that ever since Marvel's rise to prominence with their cinematic universe, every other studio has been trying to copy it, and most of them have failed quite badly. But Marvel's not actually the first studio to do such a thing. Back in the golden age of cinema, Universal had a series of loosely interconnected horror movies with their iconic monsters, including Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, the Mummy, the Invisible Man, and the Creature from the Black Lagoon, among many others, which made up the Universal Monsters. And with cinematic universes being all the rage now, it sort of makes sense as to why they'd want to do the same with their Universal Monsters. Their first attempt at creating a cinematic universe was with Dracula Untold, and you can tell how well that movie was received in that this movie makes no reference to it whatsoever, and serves as the unofficial beginning of their new dark universe. So if you haven't seen Dracula Untold, don't worry, it's pretty much a standalone film. But despite all that, I was pretty excited for this movie, partially because I'm a pretty big Tom Cruise fan, and also partially because I do really like monster movies. I'm also a pretty big fan of the Stephen Sommers Mummy remake from way back in the day, as it was sort of my first big introduction to the horror genre. I still think it's a very enjoyable movie with good characters, some surprisingly effective moments of horror, and solid action. But this movie, on the other hand, isn't. In fact, it's probably one of the most disappointing movies I've seen all year. It completely lacks the gothic atmosphere of the original classic films, and it also lacks the pulpy B-movie thrills of the Stephen Sommers movies too. That's not to say that the movie completely dilutes its horror movie aspects. In fact, there's a surprising amount of horror imagery in this movie, at least when compared to other blockbusters. And to be fair, it can be kind of creepy at times. But if the movie was more of a straight up horror film, that would probably be okay. But instead, the movie tries to do so much else as well. It tries to be funny, it tries to be action packed, it tries to have this adventure feel to it, it tries to have lots of spectacle and excitement, and it just doesn't work. I'm not gonna lie, nearly every time this movie tries to be funny, it just falls flat in its face and gives itself a concussion. A lot of the humour is meant to come from Jake Johnson's character as a sidekick to Tom Cruise, and I mean sidekick in the worst possible way. This guy has no purpose being in the army because he's a complete coward and is completely useless to Cruise as well. It's like they're trying to recreate the Ethan Benji dynamic from the later Mission Impossible movies, except Jake Johnson isn't Simon Pegg, and the chemistry between these two just doesn't click at all, unfortunately. And it doesn't help that Johnson is absolutely annoying in this film. He wasn't funny in the slightest. It just irritated me whenever he was on screen. I'm not sure if that's entirely his fault, or if that's the fault of the director or the writer, but nothing about this character worked for me. I'm glad that he's not in the movie that often, but man, he is annoying whenever he does show up. The action scenes in this movie are passable. They're well staged and competently set up, but I don't know, I just didn't feel very excited while watching them. There's a big set piece involving Amunet's undead victims chasing Cruise and his love interest in an ambulance, and while they look pretty creepy, they're so obviously animated that it just kind of takes away a lot of the tension and horror from the scene. But easily the best set piece in this movie is the plane crash sequence, which you've all probably seen in the trailers. Mainly because they actually did film it on board a real plane called a Vomit Comet, and it at least shows Cruise's commitment to the action scenes. The rest of the action, though, is just kinda generic. A lot of literal CGI shitstorms and very rapidly cut fight scenes. If you're concerned that the movie diluted its horror aspects, don't worry too much, that's not entirely true. There is some pretty shocking horror imagery in the film, and it does push its PG-13 rating quite far. It really deserves its 15 rating in the UK, I feel. There's a couple of really creepy and unsettling sequences that do actually kind of work, and nearly all of them involve the movie's villain, Amunet. Whenever she's first awoken, she is legitimately creepy, and I like the look of the character. She has this very ghoulish appearance about her, and whenever she attacks her victims, she is genuinely disturbing. However, the horror movie elements don't always work, unfortunately. A lot of the scares in this movie just don't register with me because they're just jump scares that you can see coming from another continent, and they get less and less effective as the movie goes on, trust me. And it doesn't help that the movie has very little sense of atmosphere to it. That was one of the best things about the Universal Monsters franchise, the gothic overtones. I'm a big fan of that sort of film, but that's very much absent here. largely because the directing is overall acceptable, but lacking in flair or style. It's just very listlessly directed. And Alex Kurtzman, who's mainly known for his questionable output as a writer, makes very little impression as a director here. I must say I like the look of Aminette's victims whenever they're possessed. You can tell a lot of CGI was used on them. They have a very digital look about them that really distracts. And I'm not normally the person that complains about CGI. When it's used well or it's used in a way that you don't actually notice it, that's fine and all. But there's a lot of movies that just have a very artificial look to it, and the CGI in this movie is no exception. It just doesn't look very good all the time. There's some CGI shots that don't even look finished, and there's some really obvious use of green screen effects as well, especially in that plane sequence. But if I were to compliment anything about the effects in this movie, I would definitely praise the makeup work, especially on Aminette. It looks really good, and I think it actually adds to her creepy appearance. It also helps that Sofia Boutella is brilliant in the role of Aminette. She's easily one of the best things about this movie. But even then, back when I first saw the trailer for the movie, I remember thinking to myself that she reminded me a lot of Enchantress from Suicide Squad, and I think that both villains suffer from very similar problems, and they're easily at their most intimidating and menacing when they're not all powerful and when they're covered in dirt. They look a lot more creepy, frightening, and even genuinely unnerving at times that way. But once they actually gain all their powers and become your standard Doomsday villains, they automatically lose a lot of the interesting attributes they had up to that point. Thankfully, Aminette isn't quite as bad in that area as Enchantress was, mainly because Boutella can actually act. And it even makes up for how underwritten her character is, as it's basically nothing more than a gender-swapped retelling of Imhotep's backstory from the original films. But even though Aminette is still massively underdeveloped as a villain, she's still far more interesting than any of the protagonists in this movie, especially Tom Cruise. The guy's a great actor, even if he is mainly known more for action movies nowadays. That's not necessarily a bad thing, because I do like those movies. Minority Report, Jack Reacher, the Mission Impossible movies. Hell, I even kind of like War of the Worlds to an extent. But while in those movies I at least felt like he was actually playing a character, I don't get that here. I just feel that he's playing himself half the time. His performance is just so listless and lacking in his natural charisma that he seems like he's on cruise control the entire time. Pun intended. Granted, he isn't helped by how his character is written. He just comes across as a massive dick the entire time, forcing his annoying sidekick into helping him attack a village full of insurgents by cutting off his water supply. And he's supposed to be this lovable rogue type, except he's not lovable in the slightest. And nearly everyone else in the cast is quite poor as well. I already mentioned Jake Johnson as Cruise's sidekick, but Annabelle Wallace is very miscast as his love interest, playing the least convincing archaeologist since Cara Delevingne in Suicide Squad. Aside from Johnson, she probably gives the worst performance in this movie. I just never found her very convincing, and it doesn't help that her character isn't very well written either. She's set up as this very self-sufficient woman who initially seems to hate Cruise's guts, but somehow thinks he's a good person. I've heard a lot of people say her character is nothing more than a damsel in distress. I wouldn't go that far, but overall she was fairly useless in the movie, and that she has absolutely no chemistry with Cruise at all. And the whole romance stuff with her just felt very forced and tacked on. Out of the whole cast, I gotta say the one that probably fares the best aside from Sofia Boutella is Russell Crowe as Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, who has been reimagined as this universe's equivalent of Nick Fury. He's pretty good in the part, but even still, he's very much wasted in this film. He doesn't really do much aside from spouting exposition foreshadowing future movies. This interpretation of Jekyll as running this organisation that's been hunting monsters, very much like the Shield of this universe. And it's here where you can see their attempts to set up future movies as we pass through a hall showing the remains of classic monsters. It's not nearly as blatant or as desperate as Batman v Superman's attempts to set up future movies, but it's also here in this portion of the movie where the movie begins to very blatantly rip off the Avengers, and it does get very predictable here as well. Bottom line, if the 1999 Mummy movie showed how to put horror, action, and adventure in a blend of rights, this movie shows how it can be all done wrong. The tone of this movie is all over the place. It tries to do so much at once that it ends up not doing anything particularly well. And even the film's few moments of effective horror, courtesy of Sofia Boutella's memorably creepy performance as a villain, fail to save this movie from being nothing more than a sloppily paced mess that eventually devolves into homogenous blockbuster territory. And the movie isn't helped by flat performances and listless directing, but the worst thing about this movie is how disappointing it is. I'd like to see a Universal Monsters Cinematic Universe on film, but this movie just isn't a good way to do it. And it sucks that I have to say this, but this is now officially another contender for my least favourite film of the year. With its bland and homogenous directing, shoddy pacing, weak performances, and little else in its favour, The Mummy absolutely gets a 4 out of 10. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll be back soon with more reviews. In the meantime, feel free to like the video, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel for more content. And until next time, I'm Danny Quinn, and I hope you have a pleasant evening.